Coming up, a further discussion of a Vermont principal who was fired because she wasn't sufficiently supportive of Black Lives Matter. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we sit down with our international correspondent, Alex Newman, to talk about the many ways in which this Black Lives Matter stuff is canceling. In Vermont, we have a school principal who agrees with the basic tenets of Black Lives Matter, but apparently not enough. For that, she lost her job. But first, Katie's going to give us her take on the health of this republic.
Why, oh why? Another week means more woke white women being wickedly wrong and wreaking havoc. Who's the worst this week? Well, Karen, let's find out. Cancel culture is a fickle beast, and the white woke liberal women found mostly on college campuses is rampant, telling you and me just how evil we are. You may have done nothing wrong. You were just minding your business, doing your job, and treating everyone the way you want to be treated. That is to say, treating every individual as just that, an individual. But the Karens of the world are ruining it for all. They used to just complain to managers if, heaven forbid, they had to wait for service. But now these Karens are focused on race and are all about yelling at you if you are not sufficiently anti-racist. And the Karen of them all is clearly Nancy Pelosi.
Article 1 is adopted. Supports our values as a country.
Pelosi cares so much about racism in this country that she can't even remember the name of the man for whom she was faking to be anti-racist.
His name will be always remembered because you'll name the bill for him, that this legislation is worthy of George Kirby's name.
Come again? George Kirby was a 20th century comedian known for his impressions, which included white people. So I guess that means he's canceled. Or maybe not, because he's black, and that means it's not racist. Because really, either of them is not racist.
What are you talking about? Nobody can force anybody to move from their home. What is this country coming to when a family can't live in peace without a bunch of them creeps driving them out? I mean, a man's home is his castle. That's in the Constitution.
That is spot on, Archie Bunker. Thank you, George Kirby. But this is about George Floyd, who Nancy Pelosi doesn't really care about, much like she doesn't care about the Constitution. She's just using George Floyd to push her whacked out narrative. Like saying that Senate Republicans are trying to get away with the murder of George Floyd on the police reform bill.
Senate Republicans are demanding an apology for that statement. Will you apologize?
Absolutely, positively not. The fact is, people say, I think you frankly in the press have given them far too much credit for a bill that does nothing. They're saying, well, you have your bill, they have theirs. Yeah, our bill does something, theirs does nothing.
Is Tim Scott working in good faith, I guess?
I'm sorry?
She really is the ultimate Karen. Everything about her is for her and fake to the core. This is where I agree that we should tear down certain statues. Like this one. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not a statue? That's just a photo of Pelosi and Chuck Schumer? Fooled me. Another Karen fooled Jimmy Fallon, which isn't really that hard to do. He doesn't seem like he's the brightest bulb. Anyway, he just had Dr. Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, on his show to basically shame all of us whiteys, as a Karen does.
White people often say, I'm not racist. I know you have, I have done things in my life I recognize as racist today. I would not do them again. They were neither intentional or even conscious, and yet they wounded other people nonetheless. I think white people should remove that phrase from their vocabulary. I'm not racist. It's not, trust me, it's not convincing to black people. As long as we define racism as individual intentional acts of meanness, then I would agree with you that most white people are not racist.
Ugh. The smug arrogance. And then Jimmy Fallon's face. She is saying that you better listen to her because apparently she speaks on behalf of all black people. These are examples of just two of the more famous Karens, if you will. But let's not forget about all the Karens who are trying to make the Karen name for themselves. Like this Karen.
You're white and you're telling this to two black police officers.
Yeah.
Do you see the problem with that a little bit?
No, I don't, because you know what? Just because I'm white and I haven't experienced racism myself doesn't mean I can't fight for justice. They're a part of the system. They're a part of the problem. Just because they're black doesn't mean they're not a part of the problem.
Gotcha.
I'm allowed to say this to whoever. Because I'm white, racism is a white person's problem.
Yep.
Racism is my problem. I need to fix it.
Simmer. She totally read the book White Fragility, as did probably this woman who decided to walk in shame on behalf of white people.
I don't want to continue to see Black America being oppressed and held down and killed like animals.
And in the name of equality, here's a male Karen, although I'm assuming gender.
What do you hope to accomplish by yelling at them?
I hope that she takes her Blue Lives Matter flag sign off. I think that's extremely disrespectful.
And again, black guy, black woman.
I hope that they can tell her the same thing that I can tell her.
Black guy.
I hope they think the same thing I think. I hope he supports Black Lives Matter. I hope he supports Black Lives Matter. I know you don't, but I hope every man here and every woman does.
So you're white and you're telling the black guy he doesn't.
I mean, I don't understand why people think the way they think.
Oh, you wait. This racist gets dumber.
And it's sad that the white people need to be here, but there aren't enough black people because what they've done to black people. We know why there's such a small percentage of the population. If America was 80% black, I'm sure I would be black right now.
And in the name of equality, here's a black Karen who actually is named Karen. The Washington Post's Karen Attiah is attacking those fake Karens for all of their wokeness. In a since-deleted tweet, the real Karen told of the lies and tears of white hath wrought, including the 1921 Tulsa Massacre and excluding black women from feminist movements. She then tweeted, "I'm just saying, be happy we are calling for equality and not actual revenge." In April, this Karen explained in a Washington Post column how the name Karen is used to belittle people. She wrote, "In the past several years, Karen has come to represent a certain archetype of middle-aged white female privilege, or the new N-word, depending on whom you ask. Yup, Karen is the new black. Becky and Karen memes and jokes should be understood in this context, part of a long tradition to use humor to try to cope with the realities of white privilege and anti-blackness." Aw, snap, Karen. The Karen who wrote that. Not the Karen she's referring to. Too many Karens, you know? But in the name of equality, we must also show a sassy good Karen. On Sunday night, protesters were on private property using a private driveway to march on down to the St. Louis mayor's home to demand her resignation when a sassy Karen named Patricia McCloskey and her husband Mark stood on defense. The protesters broke through a gate to get onto the street. That's called trespassing. Since Patricia and Mark are personal injury lawyers, I suspect they will know how to handle the aftermath. This is the downward sloping path we are on. Americans are holding up their weapons, ready to defend their homes. If only the Karens would take a cue from that old dead white guy named Bill Shakespeare. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Maybe then we would slow this path and cooler heads would prevail. But they're canceling Shakespeare for that very reason. So instead, we're left with Karens. Until next time, stay healthy, America.
I'm joined now by our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me, Duke. Always a pleasure.
Well, yesterday we aired a show about a segment about a Vermont principal who didn't slur or slander Black Lives Matter, who admitted that she agreed almost unilaterally with Black Lives Matter, but she was fired from her job because she didn't show enough enthusiasm for Black Lives Matter. Tell this story in Bernie Sanders, Vermont.
It's really, really crazy, Duke, and I think it highlights the broader problem. But so you have this principal who said, she actually agrees with it. She just said, I'm not a racist if I don't walk around carrying a Black Lives Matter sign or wearing Black Lives Matter paraphernalia. And she didn't agree with coercion. And, she expressed some very, very mild reservations about the tactics, not, the ideology, not the organization. And to be clear, Black Lives Matter is a radical, Marxist, insane organization. We could just go to their website. They want to dismantle the nuclear family. The founders, two of them have publicly said that they are Marxists, right? There's that one video that's been circulating for a week where the founder, she says, we're all highly trained Marxists and we're super well versed in ideological. This is just psychobabble that she probably picked up from some silly university professor. That's highly trained. But then you have the other one, Alicia Garza, who said it was founded in part to glorify and memorialize Assata Shakur, the cop-killing revolutionary Marxist who was jailed and convicted for murdering a New Jersey state trooper and then was busted out of prison by the Weather Underground terrorist organization, which was working with communist Cuban intelligence. They got her down to Cuba. This is a terrorist Marxist organization. And the principal didn't say, I disagree with them. They shouldn't be Marxists. Dismantling the family is a stupid idea. She just didn't express sufficient levels of enthusiastic support. And so the school board held an emergency meeting where they decided that she doesn't represent our community. We've got to get rid of her. And that, I think, really tells you everything you need to know about the government's indoctrination system masquerading as a public school system.
Well, if she is not suing them, she's pathetic. Then she gets what she deserves. She really ought to take this to court. This is, this is now not just being an ally. This means you have to be vocally committed to these causes. One of the things that really drives me crazy about the stories like this, Alex, look at how the left now is going back through everybody's history, going back 6, 8, 10, 20, 50 years to try to find any evidence of any politically incorrect statements that might have been correct then that are now politically incorrect so they can cancel these people. You got people going back 25, 30 years in some instances doing this. Meanwhile, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, where their organization, their aims and ambitions are all spelled out. They're all anti-American. Like you said, they're completely Marxist. This isn't about Black Lives Matter. This is about pushing the end of capitalism and free markets. You look at who their donors are, the shady characters like George Soros who are funding them. So on the one hand, if you're a hapless white athlete or actor who 25 years ago made an offhand remark or wore blackface on a skit, right? You're done. You are canceled. However, the obvious associations of these organizations, to even question them, to even suggest we look at who's funding them or what their ultimate objective is, that's now racism too, as our principal found out.
It's completely insane, Duke, and it's going to end in tragedy. It's going to end in disaster. They're essentially now running like a gangster extortion racket, too. They're going to businesses and saying, hey, fork over the moolah or we're going to label you racist, and then, there's going to be protests outside your business and all the rest of it. And all these stupid companies, here you go, have millions of dollars. I read that there was, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars now that have been funneled into this movement, really as a protection racket. These gangsters are going and saying, hey, you give us money or we're going to target you. This is completely un-American. It's completely insane. The whole idea that they get to appropriate Black Lives Matter is ludicrous, right? If I call an organization, don't kill puppies, and then I advocate for communism or Marxism or KKK, and then you disagree with me and I say, then you want to kill puppies. It's the most idiotic thing in the world, and anybody with even a rudimentary education would see right through this, but clearly the victims of our public school system, at least many of them, cannot see through this, or they're too scared and intimidated to. Either way, it is an absolute indictment of the education system that we're in this situation now, and I hope it'll be a wake-up call to parents and to teachers and to students about how insane things have actually gotten.
Yeah, and on the other side of the break, we're going to pick this up. I have some more questions for you, and we'll look a little deeper at the story. All right, back with Alex Newman on the second segment we're devoting to this Vermont teacher who was the principal who was actually fired for not being sufficiently woke and supportive of Black Lives Matter. First thing I want to comment on is the superintendent of the schools basically said, her values are not our values. That is an Orwellian statement. Her values are not our values, right? That the fact that she supports Black Lives Matter, she's a good progressive. I'll bet every last dime I have she's going to be voting again for Joe Biden. Completely down the line, bureaucratic, progressive liberal principal who made one codicil to her adoration for Black Lives Matter, and the Inquisition hit her. What does this mean that she does not represent our values?
Yeah, and he even went further. He said this is explicitly racist, right? And I encourage people to go read her comments. There was nothing even remotely racist about these comments. But what the indoctrination system has done is it has now trained an entire generation of American youngsters, including up to my generation, the millennials. It's really not an education in any sense. It's behavioral training. It's the way you kind of train a circus animal, or how Pavlov did with his dogs. Right, you hear a certain noise and you start drooling, or you hear a certain noise, you go racism, like some kind of idiot zombie. That's where we are now, right? It doesn't actually take racism to get these accusations. It just takes any little violation of the progressive orthodoxy. And so when you have the superintendent of this school, or of this district, saying the principal made racist comments, you realize we now live in bizarro land. And I guarantee you, if you use the same litmus test that this superintendent used to label this poor principal a racist, he is equally a racist. And what's happened here is it's a very neat psychological trick. What's remarkable is how there could be enough gullible morons to believe something like this. But they've basically created this paradigm now where civilization, rule of law, individual liberties, patriotism, support for the Constitution, that these are all white supremacy. And if you defend any of those things, you're a defender of white supremacy. So, it really takes somebody as dumb as a box of rocks, or somebody who's been mentally handicapped, to fall for something like this. But clearly there's enough people in this district in Vermont and in many other school districts across America who have been so thoroughly indoctrinated that something like this can actually pass as legitimate, as reasonable. And that shows me that we are in for some major trouble. Vermont may be a little bit ahead of the rest of the nation, along with California and Illinois and New York, but Oklahoma, South Carolina, Nebraska, Montana, they're not that far behind. So in the not too distant future, if we don't reverse course urgently and dramatically, we're going to see idiocy like this all across the country. And at that point, everybody better watch out. I always remind the communists, Leon Trotsky ended up with an ice pick in his head. That's going to be you too. I mean, the mob is not going to stop once they get all the conservatives. They're going to be coming for you next. Yeah, and you mentioned that it's hard to believe there's this many morons out there who believe it. Come join me at the university sometime and see a sea of young, dumb, uneducated minds that have been hijacked by ideology. And number two, you also made that beautiful analogy of Pavlov, but I'll correct it. It's like Pavlovian if Pavlov was a Reichsfuhrer under chancellor, right? Pavlov was his experiments were politically neutral, right? Let's see if we can get a dog to salivate when a bell rings. These professors, these public school teachers, these superintendents, these educrats, these Black Lives Matter and Antifa thugs, they are literally demanding an educational system, 1619, the education paradigm, that will be replacing Howard Zinn in a school near you within a year or two. The entire premise is that we're going to teach them to believe that everything that is not viewed from not an African-American perspective. Most African-Americans don't think this way. From a radicalized Marxist version of co-opted African-American black power. Unless you see everything from that perspective, you are a bigot. That's right. And to be clear, Duke, the goal here is to absolutely dismantle our society, dismantle our liberty, and move us toward a totalitarian system. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just go to the Black Lives Matter website and read what they're saying. They want to dismantle the nuclear family. They want to completely tear down the foundations of this nation that not only paved the way to end slavery around the world, but created more individual liberty and more prosperity than any society known to man in all of human history. So this is insanity on steroids. The root cause of the problem is the brainwashing taking place in the public schools, and this case in Vermont illustrates it perfectly. And it also should show liberals and progressives, they're coming for you next. Don't think you're exempt. Don't stand on the sidelines. You are next.
It's time now for some real education. Countee Cullen was born Countee Leroy Porter on May 30th, 1903. He was an American poet, novelist, children's writer, and playwright, and was particularly well known during the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was influenced by a movement called Negritude, which represents the discovery of black values and the Negro's awareness of his situation. Cullen saw the movement as an awakening of race consciousness and black modernism that flowed into Harlem. Cullen's short poem, called Incident, reflects the movement in a simple but powerful way.
Yeah, and I think when we are so censorious now, we're looking back in history, and anything that offends us now that was really progressive in its day, we have to cancel. This little poem by Countee Cullen, a really wonderful African-American poet, it contains the N-word. And I'm not going to say it because you won't let me. And when I mean you, the cancel culture, right? This is a fantastic poem that highlights that word once in the poem, the N-word. And if you don't say it or don't read it, the power of the poem's gone. What you are doing by censoring this kind of stuff, you've got idiot high school teachers in California refusing to teach Huckleberry Finn because it has the N-word in it. And another great African-American writer, Ralph Ellison, actually pointed out in the 1950s that Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn, he said, was the most moral book on race ever written. He used the N-word Twain not because he was a racist, but to show how that word demeaned Jim. And now we can't read it to our kids. This kind of erasure is not progress. This beautiful little poem from Countee Cullen, it's set in the mouth of a little boy. And I'm going to read you the poem. And when I get to the word, I'm just going to not say it. And tell me if the poem what is lost in this poem. Incident, 1925, Countee Cullen. Once riding in old Baltimore, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Devastating. And you take the word out and the poem means nothing. In fact, the entire premise of the poem is that word. Let me read it again. A young boy, never seen from the country, never seen a big city. He's just driving in a coach and just amazed by the buildings and the culture, and sees a little boy just like him. I mean, if there's anything more universal than little boys, right, finding other little boys. But in this racially charged atmosphere, what happens? Once riding in old Baltimore, just the joy of all the experience, right? Once riding in old Baltimore, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me. What have you removed? You've removed a hateful word, but, not so hateful that you can't replace the ending R with an A and use it in your rap songs, right? Not so hateful that black people don't use it on each other frequently in slang. A word that's supposed to be so devastatingly unprintable, unspeakable, that we use it in our counterculture all the time. You've actually now got white Antifa members screaming it in the faces of black cops without any consequence. So forgive me if you can use that word so colloquially, but then take it out of a work of art where its entire premise is to shut down everything else. That little boy was full of life. He was full of curiosity. He was open and warm to everything. And that other little boy who called him that name stopped it all. And you want to erase that word from that poem, shame on you. I'm going to read it again, and I'm not going to read the word. And just mourn the gap. Mourn what outrage cancel culture has done, not just to our statues, not just to our books, but also to our art. A great poet silenced, a great African-American voice who spoke boldly before others did, silenced by your childishness. Once riding in old Baltimore, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me. I saw, notice how the sprightly gallop of the horse carriage of excitement, da 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 da, turns to a much more sad type of versification. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, it's all that I remember. So think twice before you seek to erase everything, because in erasing those things that you think are bad, you are erasing those people who overcome that badness. Now, when I was a professor, a young graduate student teaching at Purdue University, I'll never forget this. This is going to be a little longer ending segment, but I'll never forget it. I was asked by the department chair. We had a class offered on African American drama. There was supposed to be a course taught by the drama department on African American drama plays. And the woman, African American woman, who was supposed to teach the course, she got mad about something. And so a couple weeks before the class began, she literally quit and refused to teach the course. So now you have a course with 32 students in it. From all different intellectual disciplines across the campus who wanted to take this class. There was nobody else, apparently at the whole faculty level, who could teach it. So knowing my rather diverse reading background, the department chair, I'll never forget her name was Margaret Monroe, Scottish woman, about 4 foot tall, but with a mind much bigger. And she came to me and she said, Duke, there's no one else who can teach this class, but you can do it. I know you can do it, and a lot of the faculty know you have the ability to do it. Would you teach this class? Now, again, I'm a graduate student, teaching only composition courses, freshman writing. I was thrilled with the opportunity. I'd read most of those plays. I knew black drama. In fact, the title of the course was actually Black Drama at that time. And so I asked her, though, very specifically, I said, is this going to be this was 1995. I said specifically, is this going to be a problem, though? I mean, in today's world, this would be a problem. But I asked her if it was going to be a problem, and she said, not the way I know you're going to teach the class. And so I taught this class, and the class, there were 32 kids, 18 of them were African Americans. The only class I've ever taught that was a majority of black students. And I started the first day of class, and I said to him, look, my opening statement was, we had two options. We either cancel this class and no one gets to study these great books, or we go with this class and let somebody like me teach it. I said, in my mind, canceling the class because of my race would be a sin to those great writers. So I'm going to start the class by telling you, I'm white and proud. I'm proud to be white. Couldn't say that today. But I hope, I said, that you're proud of who you are, whatever you are. And if we understand that, we can move forward and look at these really wonderful books, these wonderful plays. I had the highest evaluations on that course almost that I've ever had. The kids loved it. So successful was it that over the next summer school, she asked me to teach it again because there was nobody else to do it. Those days, unfortunately, are long gone. Right now, if you're not a black professor of black literature, then you're a very angry liberal white woman. I've mentioned this before, right? At every university I've taught at, 7 of them, there just weren't enough African American professors who wanted to teach these books. So they're always being taught primarily by liberal white women. That's a shame. But they have every right to do it the way I had a right to do it. It's just a sad thing that in, 25 years, we've created a situation where these kind of things are even questioned. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But Countee Cullen, you deserve to read him for what he said. And if you take what Countee Cullen did all around that word, it only appears once, but that word utterly changes everything. It completely transforms a little boy on a Baltimore route to something really, really depressing. And if you take it out, you're gutting everything that made people, African American people, what they were in how they struggled and overcame. It's a sad, sad thing.
And there you go. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. If you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. The name Karen was most popular in 1957 when 40,588 Karens were named. That makes them turning 63 this year, but Nancy Pelosi is 80.
If we're going to have a word for hysterical white women who are itchy and privileged and somewhat racist, let's have a word for black women who are like the Jemele Hills of the world, who are vapid and angry and opportunistic and dishonest. Let's have a word. Fair is fair. Instead of Karens, we're going to call them Canisius. All right? For every Karen, right? Who's calling the cops on somebody who's walking his dog in the wrong place or not wear or asked to wear a mask at a public grocery store. We should have a word for the Jemele Hills of the world, and we'll call them Kenishas. These are small-minded political bigots pretending that it's okay to be a bigot if they're black. So Karen, meet Kenisha, you both can go to hell. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.